Mission 43 is in the 43rd state of Idaho, back here with our podcast. Today we have former Marine James McCarter. He's also an entrepreneur and a cybersecurity nerd, and we're here to talk about a wide range of topics, but I'd say primarily how to turn the anger and bitterness that can come from some of our military service into something positive. Let's get after it. Welcome to the Mission 43 podcast, a podcast dedicated to discussing the struggles and triumphs of transitioning to life after the military. I'm Dan Nelson. I'm a former Army Special Forces officer who's personally experienced the challenges of transitioning to civilian life. In every episode, we'll be sharing tips, strategies, and real-life stories of veterans and their families who've chosen Idaho for their life after the military. So join us, and let's start the conversation. James McCarter, thanks for being here, dude.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me, dude.
Yeah, from Shadowscape, as in the cybersecurity entrepreneurial venture, now a person that is helping a bunch of other veteran entrepreneurs throughout their course, including during Boise Entrepreneur Week.
That's the idea, I suppose.
Well, I guess, I don't know if it was your original idea, but it's something that you have become really critical for us at Mission 43 to be a part of.
Well, I think when you do it long enough, you figure out a lot of things not to do. So I'm happy to fill in a lot of budding entrepreneurs in that way. So.
Well, that is the only gift that I bring to anybody in Mission 43 is showing what path not to take. Yeah. So,
no, that's why I think I gravitate towards you, Dan.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
Well,
so
that and my massive biceps, I think.
That was I'm glad you brought it up. Yeah. I didn't want to, but now that it's out there on the table, yes, that's number two for sure.
How long, you said you've been at this for a while, how long have you actually been doing this cybersecurity thing?
Well, I didn't really plan on going down this road. Not that I shied away from it, but when I left the military, I was teaching intelligence-driven operations to NATO Special Forces in Belgium for a couple of years, and
as a contractor or still
as a contractor, okay. Yeah. So I think when you, as a young Marine, my last year in, I was teaching the new Marines that came in, and it wasn't as fun anymore. I don't think you're ever going to have more fun than you do as a junior Marine.
Yeah,
so
agreed.
The party was kind of over, I thought, and I got offered this job to teach out at NATO as a contractor, obviously for about double the pay.
Right.
So I'm like, that sounds awesome. So I went and did that, and I was teaching them like digital data triage. So I was in signals intelligence in the Marines, and
nerd.
I know. I was also a cryptologic linguist, so I was like a double nerd, which just means that we know what wines crayons pair best with. So, and I'm a bit of a connoisseur in that respect.
Oh, but that's helpful.
Yeah. So if anyone's interested, let me know. But during that time, I was teaching like digital forensics, digital data triage, biometrics, explosive residue detection. And really what we were doing is working in support of a program called the Combined Explosives Exploitation Cell, which was a intelligence aggregation unit meant to curb the IED threat, which had become super pervasive.
Great job on that, thanks.
Yeah, well, actually, we made a huge impact. So
I'm just kidding.
I think initially the knee-jerk reaction was like, let's just up-armor our trucks.
Right.
Cool. So the bombs got really collateral damage. Sweet. So the bombs got really big, and it became really apparent that we needed to use intelligence to get in front of things. And so during that time and shortly after, I had worked with as a consultant with the State Department's Anti-Terrorism Assistance Program, the FBI's Computer Forensics Lab, Internet Crimes Against Children, and as I was doing that, I had one of my former colleagues say, hey, I'm going to go start the cyber company, and I want you to come be my first employee. So I was the first employee at this company as the director of cyber threat intelligence. So it was taking intelligence and just applying it to cyber threats, which is what we'd been doing in the kinetic, sphere.
This sounds kind of unbelievable in the fact that, as someone that also was once a boot Marine going through boot camp and expecting to be treated when I came back here to Idaho like Jason Bourne,
right?
Because of my experience, you had that experience.
Yeah,
I worked as a bouncer at Night Moves and Cowgirls in Kuna.
I think the mistake you made is coming home to Idaho directly after.
Nailed it. Well, no, but we are trying to bring people here to Idaho.
Yeah.
So what you meant is...
Yeah, totally.
I'm just kidding.
No, well, especially back then because, Mission 43 wasn't,
wasn't a thing yet.
Wasn't a thing, so maybe that's why. But, so what I did is I went to Colorado, which is where that NATO gig was centered out of.
Oh, really?
And so I lived in Colorado Springs for about 5 years after the military.
The motherland.
Yeah, exactly. So we, my wife and I were both from here. Grandparents were here. When we started having kids, we decided let's move back to Boise. It's really where our heart is. And so moved back here, and I got to work remote, before it was cool.
Yeah.
So I'm one of the OGs in remote work. So I did it for about 5 years with that other organization. So I was with them for 7-ish years. They ended up, we IPO'd on the NASDAQ. They ended up getting sold. So I left in about 2019. The culture had changed. It just wasn't what I set out to start, and just things changed. It was kind of a
nerds picking on nerds.
Yeah,
swirly content.
It just didn't turn out as good as we had hoped. Right. So somebody made a lot of money from it. It wasn't me. So I guess I'm a glutton for punishment. So I started Shadowscape in late 2019, which was a really interesting time to start a company.
Did something happen in 2020?
Yeah, so it was crazy, actually. I don't know if you'd heard of this Corona thing, but yeah, it was in the news. I mean, I would Google it. Check that out. Kind of threw a wrench in things. And so for a couple of years, we kind of just wandered, had cardboard signs that said, "We'll cyber for food" and stuff like that. But we made it. We just scrapped and did services here and there. But we always knew that we had a greater mission of what we were trying to solve. So around 2022, we got some pre-seed funding. Part of, you had mentioned winning BEW. And then we had some additional pre-seed funding that kind of kicked things off, and that kind of got us to where we are today. So I would say, yeah, that was a very long way for me to answer that question. So
7 years.
Yeah. So I don't know, I guess 10, 15 years.
Well, it's been a minute.
Altogether, yeah.
But BEW, you're talking about Boise Entrepreneur Week. How does one win Boise Entrepreneur
Week? So we actually sort of didn't win. Ask Galena Innovations, is they actually won the pitch contest. What we won was a safe note, which is just an investment instrument from a company called Kinetic. So it was the biggest prize that year. But the way we won wasn't as much based on my pitch. They do this whole assessment process where you have to interact with like a personality profile thing. So you got to interact with this thing for like an hour or two. And so what they've done, they're basically playing Moneyball with investments. So instead of, hey, this person, looks good, fits all the check boxes, whatever.
And that person gets on base.
And they get on, right. That's what they went to buy runs, right? So they focused, what do all the CEOs and all these thousands of successful firms have in common personality-wise?
They get on base.
That's right. So same sort of thing as they're like, well, they have grit in this space, they do this, they do that, whatever. So they put together this big psychological profile of what does the ideal CEO look like. And so there are about 57 candidates for that iteration, and we won that. So that's how we won.
Because of your psychological CEO profile?
Apparently. Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
That's like a whole new level of point of pride, dude.
It is, but when you try to explain it to people, you're like, no, dude, there's this big psychological, like, I have emotional intelligence, man. Like, just give me a check.
Yeah.
It doesn't work out very well.
Is that what a safe note is? To me, you have to dumb it down. Like, a safe note is what I put my hunting plans and put in my gun safe in case I don't come back.
That's probably more relevant. No, a safe note. So have you ever heard of like a convertible note? So essentially it's the promise of equity.
I played alto saxophone in the intermediate 6th grade band.
Okay, that totally
applies. Is that
applies.
the same thing? Like
yeah.
The note that transfers?
You're close.
Okay.
You're really close.
Okay.
I mean, relative to the grand scheme of the universe, that's very close. But in a more specific way, it's basically a promissory note for equity later on. So the reason why a lot of early stage companies and investors like to execute safe notes, it's a relatively newer instrument. In fact, that's what SAFE stands for, is like something for future equity. I don't remember what SA is. Making myself look stupid here, but something for future equity, right? So the idea is when you're a startup, it's really hard to value your company.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because you're just starting.
Yeah, so it's not, you can't really base it off of
revenue.
revenue.
Smart one here. You know,
you're picking it up. Nice.
I got you.
Yeah. No, you're very well qualified. So
make a note of that.
Yeah, on this day. No, so if you can't really value it, what you do is you set terms like market caps, and they basically get a discount once you do a valued priced round later on. And so they're kind of the first there, where what they gave you will convert to equity based on the valuation.
All right.
Right, later on. So they just get a better deal. And so the nice thing about it is I don't have to go through and do all these financials and haggle over prices and things like that. So that's why early stage guys like to do safe notes. Just a lot less hassle.
Is cybersecurity something that you're personally like actually passionate about, or is something that the government spent millions of dollars training you on as a junior Marine? And
the government spent millions of dollars training me in intelligence. All the cyber stuff I kind of learned along the way.
How?
I mean, just kind of being in those communities. So like I said, I was doing that type of work. And I would use intelligence and apply it to cyber threats.
Are you saying that the Marine Corps, the United States Marine Corps, asked you to do something outside of the scope of your actual job title?
Why don't we get into this a little bit, right? Because I spent 1.5 years learning Korean, and I spent like 4 months in Korea. So yeah, that's just kind of the way that the government does things. If you know of a better way, Dan, I'd like to hear it. Okay,
I don't. I'm sorry.
So, not to mention all the guys that I worked with in Korea, all the Korean like Katusas, the Korean nationals, all spoke like perfect English.
Yeah,
I'm like, why am I here?
It's a valuable investment.
So my second deployment, I kind of lobbied to get on a SIGINT support team. And that's where I did
SIGINT being signal intelligence.
Signals intel. So I did a hazard deployment in the South Philippines, attached to an Army Special Forces team, providing
Never heard of them?
support. Right? I'm sure you haven't. I'll tell you all about them. They're terrible, but anyway,
hurtful.
Shots fired. Too soon. Anyway, no, and I loved working with those guys. Asymmetric warfare, I think, is absolutely the way we should be addressing just about every skirmish in the 21st century, but I digress. That was my favorite deployment by far, but obviously getting into that, that aspect, I was doing a lot more of the technical signals intel stuff. It had nothing to do with linguistics in any capacity. So you kind of just pick up pieces of it as you go, especially in a highly technical field like that.
Yeah.
there's so many niches where you could become proficient, and forensics and stuff like that is just kind of where I don't know, I just naturally gravitated towards, which as cell phones were kind of in their infancy, I was doing a lot of cell phone forensics. They got more complicated, which kind of became computer forensics, which grew into network forensics. And next thing I know, and they were all investigation, right? And for like criminal investigation. So it was taking that type of investigative process and just applying it to cyber incident response. And so you start looking into that stuff and pick up certs and things along the way and work with guys operationally. So I just picked up on a lot of this stuff, but I feel like more of an intel guy than I am a cyber guy still. And then these days as a CEO, like I do like payroll and bullshit like that. So it's less.
You've become an
operational.
officer.
Yeah. It's
You're reading books about leadership while all the nugs that had abusive fathers on farms throughout the country are getting work done.
Right, and they're doing all of God's work while
Indeed.
I sit there and take credit for it.
Exactly. That's very familiar to me. Yes.
Right. That's called the American dream. So here we are.
Yeah. So you're married to a woman this time.
I am.
And you have how many kids?
I have 2 kids.
How has that process been then? Like, because your wife is a veteran as well.
My wife is a veteran. That's correct. It's
do you identify as a military spouse?
Absolutely I do. Yeah, I'm both a veteran and a military spouse, right? Especially her, like, because it actually irritates me, you know, and I'm I would not consider myself a progressive, but it always bugs the shit out of me when, you know, we'll go somewhere and they'll be like, oh, what's your husband's name? Like some veteran event. She's like, irrelevant, you know.
Yeah.
Like I'm a veteran. Yeah. And she paid her dues. Like she had, you know, tough deployments and she did all kinds of stuff. So I'm actually pretty protective over that. And yeah, so she's definitely probably more active in that community than I am at this point, for sure.
Well, that leads me to my next question is I found out about Shadowscape in 2019 when I was new to Mission 43. And then I kept sending and reaching out emails and stuff like that and never heard a damn thing back. Yeah. So I'm just curious, but like
I'll check with my secretary and see what happened there.
I'm just curious, like what it appears to me, and not unlike me, that you had an aversion to veterans groups.
No, I didn't have an aversion towards veteran groups, but let me just say, when you start a company, and I'm very, very protective over startups for this, there is no shortage of organization, and I'd never heard of Mission 43 or any of these other groups either. So I really had no aversion whatsoever towards a veteran group. It was more when you're a startup, there's no shortage of people looking for ways to waste your time and money. And so not knowing, anything, that's just what I assume things are when people are reaching out and offering me something. Because, nobody gives you anything for nothing in most cases. And so I've just become very disenfranchised and skeptical by anyone's like, hey, I mean, looking at my inbox, I could go bankrupt if I took everybody up on the things that people are selling me. And I always just assume that people are selling something.
Right.
And when you're a startup, man, you're living in that ramen noodle life. And so you're very, very, I get pretty pissed off when I see startups and they're like, oh yeah, I'm paying for like this business coach. And I'm like, cool. What are you paying him? Like, oh, $150 an hour. I'm like, what are you doing, man? You don't even have a product out yet. Mm-hmm. And there's always someone that'll line up and be like, hey, I'll take, some money let me coach you. Like, what business is that person built? Well, this one.
Well,
they're a consultancy. Like, cool.
Right.
Man. So,
well, Dan's business consultancy is available for $150 an hour for anyone that wants to.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
.com, right?
Something like that.
.biz. So
more likely.
So yeah, so that's usually where it came from. Especially, I mean, still people try to get a hold of me all the time, and unless I initiated the conversation, I'm always like, what is this? But the other thing is, I get literally 100 emails a day, and so things fall off the table.
I was just messing around about that, but it took us a while to connect.
Yeah.
Like, how did you connect to Mission 43?
I think it was your guys' presence that I started to realize what it was, and realizing like, oh, this isn't someone trying to sell something. You know what I mean?
Well, that's a common thing. That's how I feel about veterans organizations that reached out to me too, including Mission 43 before I got to know it.
I agree.
But as a participant, it's always scary because you're always the product.
I'll give you another point to that as well. I wouldn't say I have an aversion towards veteran organizations, but I'm very skeptical by a lot of 501c3s.
Sure.
I see a lot of money going to justifying the existence thereof versus the actual mission. Mm-hmm. And that always pisses me off as well. And so, once I figured out what mission, and that's why by far the most active that I've been with any organization has been with Mission 43, because I've never felt like, oh, now so we're doing this fundraiser now. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of great charities and everything that do fundraisers and go towards great things. But, I'm also kind of a numbers guy. And so when I sit down on the back of a cocktail napkin, I'm like, okay, you guys brought in, $2 million last year, and you helped, 50 veterans, and you gave them like, a crisp high five and a backpack or something. And I'm like, what is this organization? I see a lot of those types of groups, and it just drives me nuts. And so the benefit to how Mission 43 has set themselves up is I don't have any of that bullshit. Honestly, I haven't seen another nonprofit that's just been like, what can we do for you? You know what I mean?
Well, that's largely because we're gifted with the resource, like time and resources, because we have a sole funder. We don't solicit donations.
Absolutely. Yeah. But that's why it works, right? And I think a lot of the nonprofits and organizations that work are actually offshoots of corporations and things that are, I mean, in a lot of ways, probably a tax shelter and whatever. But when you just, I mean, when you're in the military, right? Remember when you used to get those booklets, those pamphlets of
I remember
the charities, right?
And the senior NCOs and officers in your command would make you donate to something. They're like, choose one. I'm like, why?
But the thing that was nice about it is it told you how much of your donation was actually going to the mission. Now, how they do that analysis, I don't know. I don't know how realistic it is. But looking at that, I was like, dude, these guys are like 20% makes it to the actual veteran, and the rest is overhead. And so I would always choose based on like the percentage that would actually make it to the cause. So stuff like the Fisher House and things like that, I always gifted to just because I liked their percentages. Not that I did a whole lot of homework, but that's how I judge these types of organizations. Anyway, was there a question? I don't remember.
No, I don't think there was a question at all.
I'll get off my soapbox then.
No, I'm curious. What is it? You said you mentioned you started to realize that Mission 43 was around and running in some of the same circles.
Yeah.
What was it that brought you in? Because you've been a great asset to us. When I say us, I mean the members of Mission 43, those that are interested in cybersecurity, entrepreneurship, both, and everywhere in between. Well, I'm curious, like, what is it that made you take the next step to kind of buy in?
I mean, I think a lot of it is based on, I mean, you judging organizations by their actions, right? There's a lot of people that talk big and then don't deliver a whole lot. It's just like, oh yeah, we do all the things under the sun, and then when you actually, it doesn't take much to look under the hood, right? And be like, okay, cool. Can you show me what you guys have done? And they're like, yeah, here's like 4 people that we've helped. And so just very minimal amount of digging, looking into Mission 43, realizing that, they're running all these different, benefits, and then, hearing testimonials and things from veterans is what made me go, okay, I think these guys are totally legit. And then, so I finally applied to the entrepreneur course, and I think that was like spring of 2022, and I mean, part of it was like, that was a time where it was like, oh my God, I need to do something.
Is this gonna
right
work?
there. Like, I got to figure something out. And I was kind of blown away. It was material that, I think a lot of organizations probably charge a significant amount for. And in some capacity, I think it's difficult to get that type of, training and feedback for a course that you would pay for, because there are certain things that you just wouldn't be frank and forthright about if you were trying to sell something.
Right.
So that was huge. And then just coming to some of the different events. I mean, some of the speaking events you guys have had have been so damn inspirational and really inspiring me to, kind of dig down. And I kind of, over the last 5 years, I mean, I've done a lot of hard things in my life. I can say without hesitation that this has been the hardest thing that I've ever done, without a doubt, not even close. Yeah, because, people talk about what it takes to be an entrepreneur. And I think the number one thing people say is grit and tenacity. And it's kind of a question of like, well, how much do I do that until it's crazy? When is not quitting stupid? You know what I mean? And there were plenty of times when I was like, am I out of my mind? And then something would happen and I'd be like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm not, and we'll just keep going. But if you ever want to like question your life decisions and question your worth, I mean, start a company, and you'll real quick get feedback, and sometimes you have to quiet the negativity, because there's going to be a lot of no's, and there's going to be a lot of even if they're not direct no's, just a lot of the universe saying this is crazy. And part of that might be because there's probably more prudent ways to start a company than I did. The industry that I've chosen is very, very, very difficult. It's very capital intense. So it's hard. And so going, it's always good to kind of drink from the well, and going to some of the, speaking events and things like that. And you hear from guys that like are missing limbs and stuff. And you're like, I have no excuse. Like you just buckle down and do it.
I can find an excuse.
Right. Well, I have no problem finding excuses, just whether or not they're valid. Right. That's the big question. And so for me, I have a tendency sometimes to be my own worst enemy. And so hearing from folks that overcome things that I can't even really fathom, it just kind of tells you, like, I mean, what's the worst? The bottom line is, the worst thing that happens to me is I gotta, start over. Yeah. And that sucks.
That's not a small thing.
It's not, but luckily I'm blessed to be, married to someone who, we go through these things. Things are tight. Times are really tough. And, we've had those discussions in the early days. Like, are we going to make it? Is this thing crazy? And I've leveraged kind of where my career was and my future, and having a spouse that's like, look, I mean, the worst thing that you could do is quit. And I started out in a trailer and I can end up in one again. Marissa
McCarter's a G. She is a G.
Marissa McCarter is a G, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And so it's not lost on me. And anytime, we get frustrated with each other, you have to kind of take a step back and remember who they are fundamentally, right? So even when there's the day-to-day stuff that drives you crazy, there's more than enough things that I'm like, okay, well, I don't think I would get that kind of support in any other capacity. And I haven't. Like I've had dudes that I would have taken a bullet for that, at the end of the day, just I don't talk to them anymore, right? Like things fell apart. So that's my constant. That's what I've got helping me to make this happen. This is why when I talk to entrepreneurs and I'm like, look, you need to make sure, like everyone talks about like, oh, your business model, that's all great. You need to make sure your house is in order. Because if that's not working, all this other stuff isn't going to work. Like you got to make sure that you guys are ready to weather very, very stormy days. And if you're not, and you're like, I just don't know, and yeah, she'd be stressed or he'd be stressed and whatever, well then maybe it's not right, or at least not the right time, right? I got kids at home. I got little kids that over the last 5 years, this has taken a lot of time away from them.
Sure.
And that's what kills me more than anything.
Yeah.
Honestly.
I believe you.
Being more well off financially is great, but giving up time with your kids is tough. And so that's one thing that I have started to be more cognizant of as a father and an entrepreneur is I have to set up limitations so that I'm not, missing the soccer game or the volleyball game or whatever. And so I make those things, but that's the big thing, man, is make sure your house is in order.
James, how old are you now, man?
I'm 40.
I'm 41. Where'd you go to high school?
Centennial.
I also went to Centennial High School.
I think I've heard that somewhere.
Go Patriots.
This guy.
Probably.
Indeed. Maybe.
I'm curious, like above all else, what are you? You've been a Marine. You've been an Intel nerd or an Intel cool guy.
Yeah.
You've been attached to ODAs in the Southern Philippines, working in wonderful Mindanao and the surrounding area.
Right.
You've been an entrepreneur. You've been a struggling one. You've become a very successful one. Above all else, what are you?
A husband and a father, without a doubt.
Well, that's the cheating answer.
But it's not. I mean, it is a cheating answer, right? Probably everyone says that, but that to me is no hesitation. And when I think about all the stuff that I'm doing and why I'm doing it, that's the reason. And if it doesn't jive with that, then it just kind of doesn't matter.
As far as the father piece, I ask this question fairly often of myself, and I'm not sure the answer, but I'm curious for you. What's more important as a father in relationship to your children? Is it the quality time or is it the quantity of time?
Definitely quality time, but I think it's a balancing act. I certainly try to, when I am with my kids, to be present, regardless of what we're doing. I think I had a tendency for a long time to sit, in the house, even with a laptop in front of me. And I've toned that down significantly because of that is, when I'm with my kids, I want to make sure that I'm present mentally. And it doesn't have to be going and doing these big vacations or whatever. I mean, some of our best memories are just screwing around in the backyard or playing video games and we joke and laugh and are loud and, sing very, very loudly across the house. And so just being there as much as you can. I mean, quantity is tough when both, spouses are working. And so it's not just bonding, but it's also being a parent. Like the world's crazy now. And so I try to, very much so be invested in my kids' life from a father aspect to try to offset all the insanity that's going on in the world, or at least be a presence that is somewhat, stable.
Do you feel like a success? And like, does that, a constant feeling? Does it go up and down? Like, you've had a lot in your life and you're at a pretty damn good point, seems like, from the outside. Like, do you feel like you've made it?
No, not at all. No, not saying that have you made it, I think.
Well, do you feel successful?
As far as the family that I have, yes. Career-wise, ask me. It depends on the day that you ask me, right? Because, we're in a better place now, but we're still very much so like, the problems are just bigger now. Mm-hmm. And it's like everything conceivably could kind of fall apart. So, yeah, I still feel like I took a pretty big risk, and we'll see if it pays off. Some days I feel like I'm crazy, and I'll talk to guys that I've been working with for many years, and they're doing awesome things, and they're taking vacations with their kids, and they're doing all these, they're making great money and doing all these great things, and I'm like, oh, cool. Well, I took my kids to Lagoon a month ago for a day. That was
no reason to brag here.
Yeah, I hate to be that guy, but
my kids have never been to Lagoon. Just saying.
Oh, well, I guess we'll all have to go one of these days. I'll show you the finer points, right? So, but yeah, it totally depends on the day, and I'm no stranger to some of the frustrations that I think sometimes veterans are prone to, which is, feeling like what you did, it mattered before, and then now you're trying to find meaning. And most of the days I'm great. Other days I'm like, man, I really miss it. I miss that brotherhood, and I really miss that, sense of belonging, because I'm trying to kind of build it myself now, and I'm in a very, very uncertain place, and it's very, very stressful where I'm at. So, but I mean, it's kind of the Rocky thing, right? You just keep taking hits and keep getting up and keep moving forward. It's not about how hard you hit, but how hard you can get hit. Mm-hmm. And I get a lot of hits, and you just keep pushing forward. I think when I quit, that's when I fail. And so whether or not I'm a success, well, I'm still fighting. I'm still in it.
Yeah.
So as long as I'm still pushing and still fighting, I'm alive, and I'm happy with that. And what I told my wife is, if everything falls apart, but I did everything I could, I left it all out on the field, then I can live with that.
Yeah.
I can't live with it if I walk away or I quit. I'll never live with that. And so as long as I'm just doing everything I can, then it's out of my hands. A lot of it's out of my hand. It's the way the industry is, the way the world is. Timing is a big factor. I mean, a lot of these things I don't have control over. I have control over me. I have control over the decisions I make. And I use the information I have to make the best decision possible, and I work hard. What else can I do?
That's very zen of you.
Well, where I came to this, man, is I kind of had almost a mental breakdown about 2 years in, where I was trying to control everything.
Rookie numbers, man. Right. Almost a mental breakdown. Come on.
Yeah, I was pretty much there, man. And that was kind of the breaking point. That was the give.
How did you get there? Like, was it just the work stress, or are you just trying to make everything successful right then at that moment?
It was everything. I mean, the work, feeling like, and then when you have people put, hundreds of thousands of dollars in.
Okay, that's stressful.
Feeling like, dude, I don't take it lightly when someone puts their faith in me.
Yeah.
At all. I want to be there, be that guy that, you put your faith in me. I want it to you have a huge return. And I feel like in a lot of times people have underestimated me, and so it really means a lot to me when someone put their faith in me. And, part of it was feeling like I could let everybody down, and I could let my wife down. And I think that's part of where we got to those discussions with her, where she's like, I'll start over with you. Like, we'll start from nothing if we need to. And I know that when we start from nothing, it's temporary, because we'll get somewhere real quick. And that kind of gave me license to fail based on the world, right? And it also at the same time strengthened my resolve to just do every damn thing that you can, and anything else that happens is beyond. If I can't control it, then the worst case scenario, we all start from nothing, and we'll just find a really badass cave to hang out in, and we'll start building our empire from there.
I have some marked on Onyx already, just in case.
Perfect.
We don't know how the rest of the week is going to go, so.
Yeah, no, then we're very well prepared. It's who you know. Right?
It is definitely who you know. But that takes a different type of courage, honestly.
I appreciate that.
It really does, for both you and your family. You mentioned something before about a struggle that is not, uncommon amongst military veterans that feel like they miss their role, the brotherhood that they had.
Right.
Is there any piece? Because the other half of that is, do you feel like you did enough?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, it's really frustrating for me to see things happen politically that you're like, we worked in support of that, and we lost a lot of good people for those missions that ultimately we kind of gave up on. And so I'm very, very sensitive to where we allocate military force, because you don't do it in vain. Either you have a clear mission and clear objective to success, or you don't do it.
We don't do it in vain, or we should not do it in vain.
We shouldn't do it in vain. That's my point, is we go into a lot of these things without a clear objective and clear mission, and you're like, dude, we don't need to put a bunch of targets on the back of these 19-year-olds running around these AOs that ultimately we lose people that are very, very close to us. And, then we're sitting there wondering, well, what difference did we make? And I know that, my wife and I have had that conversation, and, she lost a lot of close friends, in the Middle East, and then watching how we kind of just gave up on some things. But part of it is like, we didn't have a clear objective in mind, but when we look at the individual things, like the individual missions, you can start to see, okay, we made differences in this person's life, and this person's life, and this person's life. And so that's I think where we go to. But I mean, like when I was in the Philippines, man, I'd build these badass intelligence packages and then give it to like their S2 chief, and they'd be like, oh, great, thanks, and go back to watching their movie, and I'd be like, what am I doing? Like, we could finish this in a month if you just kind of let us go finish the job. But we sit here and pussyfoot around, not really sure what we're doing, like kind of fighting a war and kind of not. That all that does is get people killed. And so that's the stuff that really pissed me off, is in a lot of ways, I joined right when we invaded Iraq, and I'm like, I'm gonna go, be a hero or some shit, right? You're out of high school, You're full of piss and vinegar. 9/11 had just happened, and I'm like, I'm gonna go kick doors in and do fight for freedom and stuff. And then once you grow up, you start to see the strings that control the system, and you're like, it's not as cut and dry. And so, do I feel like I did enough? Yeah, I guess, because what I feel like I could do a lot more of is be an advocate for ensuring that when we go do something, it actually matters. Because what pisses me off is not so much being in a position where, because what pisses me off is the fact that I could have done more, but that wasn't in my hands, right? That's what pisses me off the most. Is I was in that deployment, for example, for 8 months. We could have moved mountains. We had intelligence that absolutely could have saved lives and put scumbags either behind bars or in the dirt, and we didn't do it. Like, we knew where they were, and just the way the geopolitical sphere was turning, we didn't get to go do those things. So that
You were
pisses me
there
off
to
a lot
advise
more.
and assist.
Right, exactly. Hey, push this button. Oh, you didn't push it. Shoot. Like, we would try to make things as dummy proof. Hey, here's names and dates and exactly who's going to be where. And we've built up this whole, engagement, and we're there to advise and assist, right? And so at that point, we don't ever take a hard look at it and say, all right, well, the hell with it then. Either let us take care of it or see ya. But, I mean, we've been in that specific skirmish for probably longer than anything else. I think they're still there doing the same thing, fighting the same groups. I just watched a movie on Netflix about that same conflict. So I get pissed off about that. I could have done a lot more, but I never walked away feeling like, oh, I held back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, it's a unique position to be in, and it's a unique fire that I think is not uncommon in a lot of veterans of the GWAT.
Yeah.
But I would say it's uncommon on how you've harnessed that and not just become a bitter, self-destructive person, that you're using your fire for good in a lot of different ways.
Well, I hate watching a lot of these service members go down that road. I mean, that's really tough, and it doesn't need to be that way. You don't need to feel that way, because, I mean, it was effed from the beginning. You had the capability to do things better, and we had the capability to move the needle. And it's to me, it's almost like, you're watching a football game and it comes down to the kick and they miss. And it's like, oh, everyone hates that kicker. Well, the team let everybody down, right?
Exactly.
It's not the kicker's fault at the end of the day. So you got to look at it from the broader scope of what the actual, action is. It comes down to these individual missions that you're a part of, and things don't go the way you wanted, or you didn't go out on this certain mission. It's like, well, yeah, but the game was screwed up from the beginning. The rules were broken and they weren't working in your favor. And ultimately, I think all you do is stir the hornet's nest a little bit. And so you just prolong things. I mean, does anything, get better? And again, it comes down to a lot of political leanings one way or the other for how we approach these things. And I think there are arguments to be said, but ultimately I think there are more people that don't have a vested interest making decisions on how we engage these types of actions. And so if you're a veteran and you're feeling like, oh, I could have done more or whatever, dude, you stood on the line, right? In my case, you stood on the yellow footprints. You were ready and willing to give your life for your country. Like, that's enough, right? You didn't shy away from standing on the line or standing on the wall. So take it easy on yourself and just lighten the hell up, because guess what? The world is kind of backward, right? And it doesn't come down on you. It's not on your shoulders. You wouldn't have been the turning point in the war. You know what I mean? There's no individual, oh, you would have been the guy, you could have changed things. Dude, things were screwed up. You stood up to take care of business. And that means everything. And the individual little things, I mean, I made more mistakes in my life than I can count. And so judging yourself by your mistakes, what is it, like 0.47 veteran people volunteer?
Something like that. Yeah. Even less.
So give yourself a pat on the back that at least you stood up saying, I'm willing to fight, and I'm willing to put myself in that position. So there's no reason as a veteran to judge yourself based on, I mean, just lighten up on yourself. Forgive yourself a little bit for not being like Rambo or whatever, or even beyond that. Like, it's okay if you felt like a dog in a cage getting poked by a stick for a while. It's okay. Don't feel guilty about that. You got the short end of the stick sometimes. Some people do, some people don't. Me, joining was the best thing I ever did. Yeah. Hands down. But not everybody feels that way, and that's okay because some people go through shit that is a disaster. Be easy on yourself. That's okay that you're not feeling like, oh, well, I feel guilty for feeling shitty about things, right? You should feel bad about it, but you got to move past it. You can't ruminate in it. Like, use it to move forward. You stood on the wall. That's badass. Be proud of it. Now use it. Be cynical, right? Be a voice of reason. Say, don't you send our guys and girls off to war again without a clear objective on how we're going to end that action.
James, I love your candor and your passion. I truly appreciate you being willing to share actually how you feel about some things that are...
We can edit this, right?
We're not editing shit, man. This is perfect.
Get off my soapbox here.
No, I love it. It's important for people to hear.
Yeah.
Because it's not something that we hear all the time. And it's not something in a normal conversation, even between veterans, that comes up without emotion.
Right.
And like I said, man, like, you're someone that takes that and is using it for good versus some of us that use it to ruminate and sometimes do things that are not nearly as positive as building what you continue to build. So I truly appreciate you being a part of this organization, and I'll make sure that I share your email out with everyone that I possibly can.
I love it.
No. But if people are interested in what the hell you're doing and what Shadowscape is, where can they look?
Yeah. So shadowscape.io is our web address. You can reach us at info@shadowscape.io. Any security concerns, and now we're another thing that you guys graciously hosted was our cyber maturity model certification, our CMMC webinar. So any contractors that do work with the DoD now have to be CMMC certified. So we'll help you there as much as we can.
Thank you, James. Appreciate it, man.
All right, thanks, brother.
Love you, bro. Thanks for joining us for the Mission 43 podcast. We hope you found it informative and helpful. If you have any questions or feedback, please comment below or email podcast@mission43.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast to stay up to date with new episodes. Be proud of your service, not defined by it. See you next time.